Hello, general chemistry students. This is Dr. Hayes. I want to teach you how to name oxoanions and know the pattern that's there. This is going to save a bunch of time from you having to memorize a bunch of different things. Just you're going to memorize 6 things and some rules. What are they? So here are the 6 things you need to memorize: phosphate, sulfate, nitrate, chlorate, bromate, and iodate. And the formulas are given. So if you memorize those 6 oxoanions, you got to remember the names: PO4 and the chemical formulas: PO4 3 minus, SO4 2 minus. There's not really a great pattern. I can teach you that a little later, but you really need to focus in on just memorizing them. Now, once you do that, we're going to later on learn there's some patterns where we can turn ite to us, going from an anion to acid. We'll show you that in a minute. Ates to X. So remember, ates to X. Ides to hydro something ick. You'll see this. Don't worry. And then next, to give you an example of what I mean by these rules, if you have something like nitrate, if you add 1 hydrogen and you completely balance out the -1 charge with 1 positive hydrogen, this becomes nitric acid. Okay? And this is where the ate becomes ick. Phosphate will become phosphoric acid if we add 3 hydrogens to it, because it's a -3 charge. So we need to do that. If you're writing a structure with multiple oxoanions, you need to put parentheses around them because they act together as a group. And then here's an example of that with calcium phosphate. We never put parentheses around a single atom like chlorine. Okay? Parentheses are for multi-atom systems like oxoanions. Let's get started with the chlorate series. So you memorize chlorate, 3Cl(Cl)O3 minus 1. If you add a hydrogen to that, the ate becomes ick, but we add the word acid. So chlorate becomes chloric acid, HCl3. So now we got 2. If you go 1 less oxygen from the ate, it becomes chlorite, ClO2 minus 1. And then don't worry about these oxidation state numbers. We're going to talk about those later. But the name becomes chlorous acid when we add 1 hydrogen. Now, if we go 1 less oxygen from the chlorite, we call it hypochlorite. Hypo means less. In this case, 1 less. 1 less from the chlorite. If you add a hydrogen to it, it becomes the hypochlorous acid. And then we can go to the situation where you have 1 more oxygen from the ate version, and it becomes perchlorate. It's kind of a shortened version of hyperchlorate. They call it perchlorate. And that, if you add a hydrogen to perchlorate, becomes the chloric acid. Now, there's one last one in this series that you should know about, and that's just the chloride ion by itself. And if you add hydrogen to it, it becomes hydrochloric acid. This was the other 3rd rule that I wanted you to know. So chloride ion we kind of know about already. If you add a hydrogen, it turns into an acid, hydrochloric acid. Some people call it hydrogen chloride, and that's often fine too. So I have a chart on each one of these so that you can memorize them. Here's the sulfate sequence, but it's sulfate to sulfite to hyposulfite to persulfate, and then you can see the acid versions of all of those. So there's a sulfate series, there's a nitrate series, there's a phosphate series, so you need to know all of those. Okay? Bromate, just like the chlorate and the iodate family. So you need to know all of those. But it starts from just memorizing the ates, and then you follow through with those rules and those patterns that you learned. And that'll help you get through the oxoanions.